Chapter 3. An Unforeseen Ambition. Many light years away, Archmagos Domnisarius Belisarius CAWL, prime conduit of the Omnissiah and favored son of Mars, was on an urgent errand of his own. A message had reached his almighty Arch Mechanicus, the Tsar Quaesitor, as it cut its way through the warp. Not just any message, but one from Rubal Gilliman, the avenging son, the last loyal Primarch, the Lord of Ultramar, the Lord Gilliman, the Imperial Regent, and so on and so forth. Although the warp had been in turmoil for several years, no astropaths were harmed delivering this message, for it was received not by a human psyker, but by a mechanism, if that term was not too limited to encompass the CAWL inferior, or rather more accurately, a CAWL inferior, as it was one of a matched pair of devices, the other terminal residing with the Primarch. CAWL's CAWL inferior was hidden deep in the vessel, where none were allowed to go. CAWL himself only ever went there grudgingly, for the CAWL inferior was a place whence orders came, an independent tendency intrinsic to several of CAWL's personalities, meant he did not like taking orders, not from anyone, not even Primarchs. Yet this time CAWL hurried to attend, not characteristic, this haste. However, events were coming to a head, and duty could not be shirked. In order to make dealing with the machine easier, CAWL stopped by his grand library of self to swap out his personality traits. He opted for analytical, commanding, incisive. CAWL then dismissed all of his attendants and devices, everything that might be passingly curious, his magi, his servo-skulls, his vat-born vectotums, his servitors, his machine spirits. He put aside anything with any sort of self-awareness, including some parts of himself. He shred most of his outer layers, weapons, harness, his limb mounts, the great shield protector, and secondary plasma generator that gave him his high, crooked back, leaving him looking sleek, like a great mechanical weasel. He deactivated his new spheric links and data transfer devices. He purged the lesser subminds he had been working on various problems in the hinterlands of his brain, and reintegrated them with his principal intelligence centers, leaving him singular of identity and purpose. Though a little lonely because of it. When he had done that, he rushed on to a large augury, where he had himself deep scanned top to bottom, in case anyone sought to track his movements. It was unlikely anyone would dare, or indeed could tag him with a tracking device, but it was not impossible. After all, he went to a warded room, huge in scale, but containing only a small bracelet that seemed unprepossessing, but which was surrounded by an uncomfortable aura. He gritted his teeth to put on this noctilithic amulet, because he had to protect himself against the magic of outside parties. He was too much of a pragmatist to hope faith in the machine god alone would prevail. When all was ready, CAWL left the command levels of his enormous ship and headed downwards. There were other, similarly taboo places where access was fatally discouraged, but the area housing the CAWL inferior was particularly isolated and well defended. Down through cavernous halls where nothing stirred, CAWL went. Factory complexes loomed either side of canyonways, transecting the ship. Silent and cold, now their work for the Ultima founding was done. For the last 1,000 years, the Tsar Quaesitor had been full of life. Now it was an enigmatic place, an abandoned city filled with perplexing artifacts, and of its own people practically empty. Everything runs to its cycle, CAWL hummed to himself, to drive away the silence inside his skull. The lack of living presences in the halls didn't bother him. The ship had been empty like this before, sometimes for millennia. One day it would be full of life again, but he missed the chatter of his subminds arguing with themselves as he raced through yet another empty hold, where the rattle of his metal feet echoed back at him. He felt like he was hunting himself. He began to feel eager, as much as he was repelled by the inferior's tiresome delivery of orders. The machine itself exerted a draw upon him. After all, it had a mind that was a copy of his own. It was a mirror of his soul, and like all CAWL liked mirrors. Many of the personalities he favored would spend gazing into their own depths if he let them, so CAWL had put the inferior away from himself. He didn't want Gilliman telling him what to do, but also so he would not waste valuable time interrogating the mind within. Always it was this way with him. In push and pull. At least a allusion to his days, he thought. Life would be boring without a touch of contradiction. He reached the nondescript door which opened onto a lifter of unusual shape, rounded, a cocoon for CAWL's centaur insectoid form. Locked his feet into place. Gravity stiffened around the lifter, suddenly pushing down. He felt the false sensation of mass increase. It was a long way down. Descend, said CAWL. 300 decks flashed by in an instant. The reversion and subsequent deceleration was brutal. The few natural organs CAWL still maintained lifted in their fluid sacs. A soft chime announced his arrival, but the doors remained closed. CAWL underwent a series of data trials: voice print, retinas, scent, gene scan, then spiritual evaluation, and other murkier forms of assessment. The last of the machines trilled fanfares. Arms and scanners withdrew into the walls. The doors opened, and so he went into the first chamber. Probe dendrites unfolded from under CAWL's robes and pressed into ports. Now it was his turn to test the machine. He ran measurements of pre-ignition energy flows, psychic interference, and the many other parameters that had to be in balance for the inferior to function. I do not know if I could have made you any more complicated, CAWL crooned to the device's machine spirit. It gave the binaric equivalent of a blush in reply. The inner door opened onto a hot spherical chamber. CAWL went inside. CAWL had afforded Gilliman the comfort of a bonded astropath to work his terminal. Currently one Guidus Locente, CAWL recalled, though he might be dead by now, as interfacing with the inferior shortened a psyker's lifespan. Locente was not strictly necessary to the working of the inferior, but CAWL found that Gilliman responded better to a human, and it was helpful to play to his sympathy.